Hello. I hope you are all doing well. My name is Mr. Morea or Mr. M. Either is fine. And welcome to my YouTube channel where we're going to be covering history, social studies, and a variety of different topics. So a little bit about me. So one of the first things you realize when you have a teacher or you have a professor is the first thing you know of them is their name. And I know me personally, I was always curious as to what did their name mean? Where do they come from? What is their story? All this kind of stuff that happens when you first notice a teacher, especially if you don't have any friends who have known that teacher. So, Mr. Morea, that is my name, or you can just refer to me as Mr. M. Either is fine. Just a brief rundown on my name. So this name, Morea, was originally recorded in the 10th century in the Byzantine Empire. And traditionally, people thought that the word moray meant morris or mulberry, which was a type of tree that grew around the region. And it gained more and more value in the 6th century when mulberry-eating silkworms were smuggled from China all the way to the Byzantine Empire. And it also comes from the likeness or shape of a mulberry leaf. So just something a little bit interesting about my name. Something else to just consider is that we are going to be doing a lot of map work, a lot of geography. I'm going to be doing a lot of lectures using a lot of maps. There's going to be discussions using maps. Are maps real? What is the point of maps? Is that map the right map? What about that map? Is that map telling us the real story? All this kind of stuff, because there is a large variety of maps in the world and how they are created. But it also is super important because it helps us understand where things are located. For example, this is the Byzantine Empire. Most of the Mediterranean basically covering what the Romans had, a little bit less than what the Romans had. But I think it's still important to understand, when I say my name, Moray, comes from the Byzantine Empire, you know where the Byzantine Empire is. So all of these regions throughout the Middle East, throughout the Mediterranean, throughout parts of Southern Europe and Northern Africa, all of this. Moving on, a little bit about me, born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada. Definitely spent a lot more time on the right side of the picture than on the left side. I basically grew up right near Red Rock Mountain, Red Rock Canyon, and I tried to spend as much time there as I could. But the Las Vegas also has many other places, many other facets of itself. Like the Strip, which is one of the most iconic, can be seen from space, basically. All the casinos, all the lights, all the neon. But moving forward, some more about me. So I attended elementary through high school in Las Vegas, Nevada, and then I attended Loyola University for my university. I originally started off as a broadcast journalism major, then I switched to criminal justice, then I did sociology, then I did English, and then I finally settled on history. And I was able to still graduate within 4 years just because I was always taking history courses because I found it so engaging and so amazing, and I just wanted to learn more and more. More about my teaching experience. So I started out teaching in 2017, where I started out teaching in Harlem. My sister at the time was living in Harlem, so I applied to a bunch of different internships, a bunch of different positions for volunteer teaching work, and I landed a job doing 7th grade humanities for an entire summer. And we did a lot of work in mythology. That was kind of like the big topic that we were covering things for. So I created lesson plans, I did everything that I could for that whole summer, and then after that I began working at an after-school program doing after-school tutoring through K through 5 students, and then for the summer of 2018, I worked at a summer camp in Massachusetts where there was a large variety of different camp counselors there, many of them from different countries, different parts of Europe, different parts of Asia, and it was unbelievable, such a great experience. I'm still friends with a lot of people from that camp. And I taught filmmaking there. In 2019, I graduated from college, moved to Arizona, and began working at schools teaching history and classical civilizations, but also just normal history as well. Not just classics, but everything from archaeology and paleobiology all the way up until the Cold War. I covered a lot of different stuff. And now I am here teaching on YouTube and sharing my experience, sharing my knowledge with you guys. So like I said, graduated from Loyola University, New Orleans. History and English are kind of like what I studied the most. There's a picture of all my friends on the left during our graduation. And then on the right, we have me being in a theater production. I did a lot of theater in high school and in college. So I wanted to keep sharing that with you all as well. There'll definitely be some moments where we talk about plays and we talk about theater as well as a historical concept. Some more about me, sports-wise. Love the Yankees. My whole family's from New York. My family grew up in the Bronx, and then they moved out to Las Vegas. But definitely got to be a Yankee fan or else they're going to disown you kind of thing. And for football, I was kind of up and down with football. I was never like a huge football fan, but I did support the Giants a lot. But then when I finally went to New Orleans, I was like, no, this is football. And watching the Saints play in the Superdome was unbelievable. And it was just a wonderful experience, and I love the Saints. Music taste, everything. I literally listen to everything imaginable. Metal, hip-hop, rap, punk rock, alternative rock, K-pop, musicals. The only thing I don't really listen to is modern country, and music is crucial when we talk about history and we talk about social studies and we talk about culture. There'll definitely be moments where I do whole videos on hip-hop, or I do whole videos on rock and roll, or I do whole videos on the blues, or even K-pop. There's so much fascinating history with each of these genres of music that is crucial to understand. If you're going to be a fan of these things, I would hope that you'd be more interested about where it came from rather than, oh, this just sounds good. I would hope that you'd want to learn more. Now on to the real good stuff. History. What is it? Why is it important? So history as a base definition is the study of the past. However, it is much more than dates and famous historical figures. People tend to get bogged down in, oh, history is when a bunch of old people were writing things down and then they made it law. No. History is much more than the founding fathers. It is much more than remembering when the Constitution was written. It's much more than that. And it's much more than when the Magna Carta was written. There's so much more to it than that. History helps us learn where we came from. And most events in history have consequences that affect us today. For example, we still feel the effects of transatlantic slavery, which leads into the Civil War, which leads into Reconstruction, which leads into the Jim Crow era, which leads into the Civil Rights era, which leads into the Black Lives Matter movement today. All of that is still here. They are all things that impact one another. Nothing ends with the signing of a law. There is always history happening. There's always things to understand. And that's just one example. If you want another example, there can be an example of the foundation of the United States government today gives us an explanation with 2020 today and explaining why the Electoral College is the way it is and why popular vote is the way it is. The foundations of how elections work, because we just came off of a really large election, the largest in history in terms of voter turnout. So I think it is very, very important that we understand a variety of things that happened in the 1700s and 1600s have great impact today. Another thing that you need to understand, critical thinking is crucial to understanding and analyzing history and social studies. You cannot study history and social studies without being a critical thinker. It just doesn't work. Never take information that is presented to you at face value. However, if your teacher is saying, hey, remember this date, you're probably going to have a test on that date. But there's some information that you can understand is like, okay, that's real, that's a fact, all right, write it down. But there's a lot of things in between dates, in between different groups of people, where you need to understand that people have agendas, people have ideologies, people have perspectives that they want to push. And it is always good to strive to be a critical thinker, not just thinking about dates, but taking a critical stance towards the past and analyzing how we can learn from it. Because if you can understand the past, you will understand what happens in the future. For example, 2020, we've been talking so much about COVID. Everyone's talking about this is unbelievable. Never before in my life have I seen anything like this. We did see this in 1918 with the Spanish flu. There was a huge amount it was very, very similar to COVID in terms of government response, how people responded to it. There was a huge debate over mask wearing during like right now in 2020. And the same thing was an issue in 1918 with the Spanish flu, is people going out, having a good time, doing their own thing, and not realizing that there's a deadly pandemic going on. It's very similar, and that was over 100 years ago, but we still feel the effects of it today because there seems to be a lack of critical thinking when it comes to historical concepts. Another thing to keep in mind is that history has a large amount of interpretations. There is a gigantic range. There are so many different types of historians. There are people who are classical liberalism historians. There are people who are Marxist historians. There are people who are conservative historians. There are people who are a combination of all three historians. There are so many different types of interpretations for history. This is something that you learn so much when you get to historiography. Shout out to Dr. Fernandez. I don't know if he's listening to this. If he is, awesome. But there are so many different varieties of history, and historiography, which we will cover at some point, is a gigantic topic where you're basically analyzing the history of history, how history is recorded, why people record it, and what happens when that happens. That is a mouthful to say, but it is important to understand that there are a large variety of interpretations. You need to understand them all and understand how they function to get a better understanding, to be able to critically think about this and to not just accept something as is. You need to also look at a variety of perspectives. You can't just look at one lane of history and expect you to have a complete understanding. You need to be well versed in a variety of different historical beliefs and perspectives, especially when it comes to very, very important historical events. History is written by the victors. That may be true. So it's important to find people who, quote unquote, may have lost in history, to read their sides of the story, to understand them. It is very important. So topics we will cover and how this whole thing is going to work. I am going to try to upload 2 videos a week. That is my goal. That is my plan. That is my hope, that I can do 2 videos a week. That might lessen, that might increase. It just depends. Especially if I do shorter videos, I might be able to pump them out every day. But we're going to be covering everything. U.S. history. When I say U.S. history, I mean everything from paleo history all the way back with Neanderthals in the Native Americas, all the way to the indigenous populations in America, all the way to the archaeology and study of those people, all the way to colonialism and imperialism by the European powers, everything from slavery to the civil rights movement to the gay rights movement, to every single type of immigration in the United States, culture in the United States, government in the United States, everything. I am not just going to cover topics and dates that seemed important enough for your high school history teacher. We're going to be covering everything as best as I can. Mythology. Mythology is crucial. It is so important, especially if you're talking about ancient cultures and ancient civilizations. Mythology is everything on how they structure their government, how they structure their systems of law. Everything revolves around mythology, as well as religion becomes a big part of it. Colonialism and imperialism is huge. That's basically what I tried spending the large majority of my time studying in college. Shout out to Dr. Wigman. Don't know if he's watching this. If he is, awesome. But colonialism and imperialism are huge. They are so important to these issues, especially when we talk about 19th and 20th century world history. That is everything, especially when we talk about the scramble for Africa. Not enough people know that Africa was divided up by the European countries in the 1800s for resources. Europe went into Africa and said, we're going to take resources from here. We're going to set up colonies here, and here. And the Africans did not get a say in it. They were just kind of left out of that deal. That is kind of the foundations of colonialism in Africa that still affect Africa today. Ideological history. Like I was saying, how history has a lot of different perspectives. It's important to understand what those perspectives mean. What does it mean when someone's a conservative? What does it mean when someone is a classical liberal? What does it mean when someone's a progressive? What does it mean when someone is a socialist? What does it mean when someone's a communist? What does it mean when someone's a fascist? All of this stuff becomes very important to understand how people take in history, how they take in information. Cultural history. I've said this before. That is how you identify kind of the things that a society and a people value most. Is look at their culture, look at their clothes, look at their movies, look at their music. All of that stuff has a lot to do with it. Native American history. I don't know about you guys. I barely got taught Native American history. It was barely covered in my K through 12 education. It was covered a little bit in elementary school and a tiny bit in 7th grade, and then very, very little in 10th and 11th grade, and it wasn't enough. Not enough people know about Native American history and indigenous history, and it is crucial that we understand it and that we do all we can to understand it. U.S. government the foundations of U.S. government, how U.S. government works, how many people are in the House, how many people are in the Senate, how many people are in line for the presidency, how does it work, how do presidents function, what do they do, the three branches of government, all of this stuff we are going to cover, as well as politics. Yes, we are going to be covering politics and how politicians interact, especially political history and presidential history is very, very important. Like I said, 19th, 20th century world history. And there's going to be so much more that we cover. It's not just going to be this. But one thing I will say is that it's going to be a combination of survey lecture and analytical lectures on these topics. So there might be a day where we learn about U.S. history, where we learn about indigenous groups in Arizona or indigenous groups in Nevada. We analyze who they are, what they did, what kind of their systems of law, how they exist with one another, their culture, and then we can analyze their culture and analyze how they changed and evolved. And once the Europeans got to America, how they changed and evolved the landscape for indigenous people. But that'd be more of an analytical lecture. I also want to have debates and discussions with people. We're probably going to do them all on Zoom until everything is kind of squared away with this pandemic. But yeah, there'll be discussions and debates with a large variety of people who all have expertise in certain fields, in certain areas. Films, books, media. I love film analysis. I love TV analysis. I love music analysis. And I am definitely going to bring that to this channel. It might not always be 100% historical, but it is something that I love so, so much. And I definitely am going to try to do it. Lastly, these videos are for anyone. I have taught at every single grade level except 11th and 12th grade. I have not taught. But I did do a lot of like co-tutoring with my friends when I was in college. I did a lot of helping study, all this kind of stuff, all the stuff that helped me become a teacher today. But I have a lot more experience in K through 8. But there will be times where we talk about very intense topics. However, I think that we need to give our K through 8 students the benefit of the doubt and stop treating them like they are like little children. They can handle intense topics. They can handle these things. When I was teaching, I taught everything from the Armenian genocide to the Holocaust to the horrors of slavery. And my 4th and 5th graders were there with me. They were there. They were involved. They were invested. They were ready. And I know that people can take this in and have a critical eye to it. Some of the conversations I had in those classes were some of the best that I've ever had at any grade level, because we need to stop treating K through 5 or K through 8 students like they're not mature enough to handle things. Some of them are, and we need to rise them up to a level to help inspire them to be better critical thinkers, especially when it comes to history and social studies. But if a certain thing that we're talking about, especially if we talk about Bosnia and the Bosnian war crimes or the Serbian war crimes that were happening in the 90s, there's going to be a content warning on it. If you know what those events are, you know why I'm saying that. There are going to be warnings for those things because it gets very intense. And we talk about labor camps and death camps and concentration camps. There'll be a little warning, especially with everything that was happening during World War II. There will be small content warnings, and even World War I with the Armenian genocide. There might be some content warning. But I think it's very important to understand this, and we need to allow our students to deal with this, because if they don't learn this now, they're going to be 25-year-olds who don't understand why certain things are the way they are, and that's not okay. We need to be rising them up, not beating them down with like, oh, it's okay, you don't need to know that, you don't need to know that. That's not something I want to do. I want to help inspire and I want to help push them. Well, that was a mouthful. I hope you guys had a good time listening to this. I hope you did listen all the way to the end. If you did, please subscribe. Also, please check out my Facebook page, Mr. Morea. I'll be uploading content on there as well. And have a great day, guys.